um, as I start recording this video, we're the 27th of May 2023, and I intend to talk for not more than 1 hour about UPS and the movement of spirit and Europeans. Yeah. But first, I do not. I do the reason why the reason why most of my videos appear as being bland or boring or garbage or whatever. There are reasons that I'm aware of. I haven't invested a lot of time and effort to try to work on the formal aesthetic aspect, and because precisely cultural Hegelianism consists in trying to express the idea that truths about religion and the divine and spirit are made manifest in modern pop culture, not only, but in modern pop culture, and there are countless songs, movies, video games which illustrate what I talk about. I received a new t-shirt. Billie Eilish is an exceptional artist. It's kind of weird, dark and twisted sometimes, but she's exceptionally talented. Yeah. So, yeah, and I don't know who watches my videos, when, what do they understand? Is it the first video that they watch? Have they followed my development? Because I'm tormented, not tormented, I'm torn between trying to be as clear as possible, but it requires intellectual rigor, which is exhausting intellectually to repeat the same thing, to present the documents, etc. So since I've published my videos on home economics, I make less effort to reintroduce the documents in each video, because I have presented these documents over and over again. The movement of spirit, the view of the categories of Geist, etc., spirit. So yeah, and I've talked about the logical categories over and over. But here in this video, I intend to talk about UPS, yeah, and also about the quality of my videos, or lack thereof, one might say. Sometimes I am a process, so I improve daily, either because I read good books or watch interesting videos or have more experiences. And lowering my level of consciousness, it means either watching content which is less intellectually demanding, or exploring new topics, or encountering ordinary people. It enables me to improve, because either I learn new things or I am able to communicate complex ideas in a more simple way. Yeah, so I improve constantly, and one of the consequences is that I am torn between the temptation to really produce a great work, either through the written word or really a good, ordered, complete videos, or working on my documents, and I do this slightly every day. But there's the temptation of perfectionism, and also, when I say that the moral duty, well, trying to share with others, so to give them the references, the tools to share, I wouldn't say my wisdom, but the things that I have discovered and learned over the years in a simplified way. So I am a student, but also I have to be the teacher in a way. So I have to learn and I have to share my knowledge and I try to find a balance which is complicated. So I am conscious that I share an incomplete knowledge because I try to play fair by sharing potentially with anyone, but I cannot repeat the same references. Ron Paul, Per Byland, the Mises Institute in terms of economics, they speak intelligently every day almost on their YouTube channels. Otherwise, Peterson and Stephen Molyneux for intelligent conservatives, libertarian-leaning people, etc., etc. But here I intend to talk about European spirituality. Yeah, because I have been working on economics for months now. It's challenging intellectually and it's kind of interesting, and it enables to understand more the world in which we live and the current economic conditions in the 21st century and especially in 2023. But I'm not passionate about economics. It's some sort of the reasonable path, because economics is part of reality, and a lot of events and behaviors and well-being of a lot of people depends on economics and the well-functioning of economics. So that's why I've dedicated so much time and effort in trying to understand and to share good links, references, etc. With others, but I'm not passionate about economics. I'm passionate about some libertarians, precisely because they are not narrow-minded economists. Someone like Jeff Deist is competent in economics, but he's more than just an economist. He has the flame of libertarian passion, and he's more. There's more to you than that, than just economics, Mr. Deist. Yeah, so to Ron Paul as well in a way, but. The great libertarians, precisely, they understand that economics is not an end in itself, it's just a means to have a free society where you can live freely. It requires an economic order, a functioning society economically. And here, I agree with Carlyle, economics really is a dismal science. The Austrian economists, they are the best, but they are the best in a field which is not really interesting as such. It's a means, yeah, precisely. So now I will talk about UPS and Europe. So not more than an hour. I have written thoughts yesterday, actually. I have brilliant ideas constantly. I have the mind of an autistic person. I have a very wide culture. I have a hyper-functioning brain. I have ideas popping out of my mind every hour. I have countless projects, but I try to regulate myself and to focus on really what is more important. But if I wanted to, and if I could peacefully, from a moral standpoint, dedicate myself to projects, I could have countless projects to do. Book summaries, writing books, translating books, analyzing books, starting projects. I have countless ideas of good things, and I would be efficient and competent, but I try to find stability, one might say, while sharing with others, those who are interested. I try to, okay, it's almost 10 minutes. I try to share with others, as of now, without forcing my truth onto others, so that, because I know that precisely the movement of spirit, I know that there are people every day, I don't know, it cannot be numbered, but thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands who get awakened in a way, slowly, gradually, every day throughout the Western world and throughout the world at large with the circulation of information. Younger generations in the West, they learn new things every day. They get awakened because the situation is sometimes becoming difficult economically, politically, in terms of brainwashing, etc. So there are people who learn about the world or about themselves, about their own psychology. I've been watching videos about people living Christianity today. It's an interesting perspective. So there are people who are on a spiritual journey all over the world because they have access to new knowledge through the internet. So I know that there are people who walk their own spiritual path in a way each day, and I have the temptation to try to help those who can. I'm in need of help as well, so but I have to help myself, but to try to help others who are already well advanced to understand kind of the complex idea that I share, while trying to allow or to grant people the time to develop on their own, because each person has to go at its own pace, but it's difficult because I don't know who receives what, when. I know that there are people who are spiritually open to growth and development because it's, when I say it's in their nature, yeah, potentially it's in the nature of everyone, but there are people who are more spontaneously open to traveling intellectually and spiritually, and there are people who are really stuck, and no matter how intelligent they might be, they do not really evolve a lot. They have an identity, a box in which they are categorized, and they remain in that box. Well, so now it's been almost 12 minutes. Now I will talk about UPS. Every singular object is a singular object which contains particularities and a universality within itself. It can be noticed by anyone, any person. I do not randomly assert things, not always. When I'm kind of serious, I assert things that I know are true, and they can. I don't want people to believe whatever I say if it's stupid or if it's incoherent or if it's not enlightening, but you can check for yourself all the singular objects. That's the very structure of reality. Every individual object precisely is a singular with particularities and a universality within itself. And here I take examples that I've already taken over and over again, but just to illustrate. This is a singular apple. This is another singular apple. These are two singulars. They differ from one another on their singular level. Their particularity is that both are apples. They are both apples of the same variety, but here the singular is this apple, the particular is the variety apple, and the universal is fruit. These two apples, they share the universality in common. Both are fruits. Both have the particularities of being apples, but they differ on a singular level. This is another singular fruit, that's an orange. The particularity is different. Here we have a particular variety of fruit, apple, here another orange, but the universality is the same. Both are fruits. And as you can see, or precisely cannot see, the universal is kind of invisible. We cannot see a fruit in general. A universal fruit is invisible. It has no taste, no color, no shape. We cannot see the particular as such. An apple as a particular variety, or an orange, or a banana, or a strawberry, or a pineapple, or a watermelon, or a peach, or whatever, it's not to be seen. Only singulars are fully determined. It works for everything. That's why the universal does not exist independently of its particularizations and its singularizations. The same goes for books. This book is a singular book. The universal can be book, the particular can be books about philosophy, and the singular would be Crossing the Threshold by Matthew Siegel. Or the universal could be books about philosophy, the particular could be books about process philosophy, and in process philosophers there would be Schellingian, Whiteheadian, Hegelians, so it depends. UPS can vary, but every singular contains particularities and a universality within itself. And in religious language, simply, that's the beginning of the Bible. God created man in his own image. UPS, that's the concept, and every human is a singular with particularities and a universality. Each human is unique as a singular, but the particularities, they are common to many. And here to illustrate, let us say that the universal would be age. Having a quantitative determination of age is a universal feature of human beings. Being born, eventually dying, is a universal feature. The particular would be the generations. Here, let us arbitrarily define, for the purpose of illustrating, a generation, let us say, 10 years. Actually, in demographics, that's more something like 15 or 20 or sometimes 25 years, but here let us say 10 years. The people who are born 5 years prior or 5 years after your date of birth, let us assume, for the purpose of illustrating, that they belong to your generation. Because here, officially, I'm 31 years old. People between 26 and 36, broadly, it can be a little bit more, but broadly, people who are between 26 and 36 in the year 2023, they belong to my generation. People born between, broadly, 1987 and 1997. That's my generation, let us say. It can be broadened, but here, if we arbitrarily define a range of 10 years, 5 years prior or 5 years after, this is my generation. And every person is born and belongs to a given generation, depending on how you define it. But the people born in the 1930s, in the 1950s, in the 1980s, in the 2000s, they belong to different generations. So every singular human has a given specific age. Having an age is a universal determination, but the particular, the connection between the singular and the universal is the particular generation, and all the people who share a particularity in common, here in the case of the generation, they have common features, identical determinations. They share determinations in common, precisely. And here in the case of my generation, I simplify to the utmost, but basically I grew up with 9/11, the second war in Iraq, the election of Barack Obama, the financial crisis of 2007-2008, the euro currency and the building of the European Union, the internet, cell phones, mobile phones, and then the social media, yes, but actually I was already desocialized when it really started, so I never really participate in social media when I was a teenager. And then Trump, the Brexit, these are the events which have shaped the world events, which have shaped my generation politically and geopolitically. If I had to summarize, 9/11, the war in Iraq, Barack Obama, and here I speak with American references, but from a culturally French perspective, these were really profound events. The events of French politics, that was the Jean-Marie Le Pen in the second round of the French election in 2022. I was 10 years old. but I remember it was a defining moment because the far right, etc. Yeah. Yeah, but these are the important events from a media standpoint. Yeah, but on a geopolitical perspective, these are precisely the end of communism. For my generation, it's kind of meaningless from the perspective of my generation. Then when you grow older, when you acquire a culture, it's important, but the end of communism had already occurred when I grew up, and I was too young to realize, like, people who are born, let us say, in the late 1990s, for them 9/11 is meaningless because they were toddlers or they were not even born if they are born in the early 2000s, so it's kind of meaningless. The end of communism, in order to be a defining moment consciously when you grew up, you had to be born in the very early 1980s or before. Otherwise, you are too young to even understand the significance, etc., etc. Yeah. Yeah, and these are just examples. Yeah, and in terms of cultural, pop culture reference, Pokemon, of course, PlayStation 2, Xbox, Nintendo, etc. The song, I don't know, Eminem, Evanescence, Rammstein, etc., etc. These are examples. I share the same cultural references and important political events with all those who are from my generation. Yeah. And those who are born before or later, here that's just an illustration, they belong to the same universality, which is human chronology, one might say, but the references are different. Yeah. For here, I just take an example. For the people born in the 1970s and 80s, the building of the European Union was presented as a hope, as a step forward, the great leap forward. For the generations born in the 1990s or in 2000s, it's negative, one might say. Yeah. Those who are born with Woodstock, the hippie movement, and the revolt against the Vietnam War, and those who have grown up with the Reagan years, and those who have grown up in the Clinton years, etc. The world is the same because the universal is the same, but the particularization and the particular belonging shapes the perception differently. Yeah, and it's easier to communicate with those who share the same particularity. Another example, particular can be the genetic determinations, the race or the ethnicity, or the gender, or the social class, or the job, the economic category, etc., etc. Yeah. Okay. And in order to understand the world and to understand yourself, you have to know about your own particularities, which exist within your own singularity, and which are universal to the human experience, one might say. Yeah. And here, that's part of my easier communication. I've understood this a long time ago, but I've understood that it might help others to understand. If we translate UPS in terms of anatomy or physiology or morphology of humans, the singular would be the basic instincts, reproduction, and the need for food, and the belly and the reproductive organs. I simplify. The particular would be the heart, which is passion, love, and courage, and the universal would be the mind, the brain. Yeah, Plato already made this tripartite distinction in a way. That's UPS. Humans they can all agree on the universal through the intellect. A scientific truth, a scientific law, a mathematical formula is, if it's true, it's the same for all through the mind. That's what science is supposed to bring agreement between diverse people, because a scientific truth, if it is true for all, those at least who can, it's true for all, but it can become consciously known for all those who are capable of thinking rationally. Yeah. Yeah. So I've illustrated this enough. I could make many more illustrations, but I do not intend to talk about this specifically. Yeah. And here, just the illustration to notice that it is how reality is structured, namely that every singular is tied to the universal, the essence, the idea in Platonic language, or the essence in classical philosophical jargon. UPS formulated differently, the universal could be the essence and the singular could be the existence. Every existing object is the manifestation of its essence. That's a Platonic view, but actually that's how things are. And here even someone like Dawkins, Richard Dawkins, who is anti-Platonician epistemologically, he would agree that in biology every individual contains within itself the species and the genus. That every singular living individual, a fox, a squirrel, a whale, a dolphin, a bat, a wolf, a bonobo, a gorilla, whatever, contains within itself the species to which it belongs. The characteristic of the species influence and determine the behavior of the individual, and it contains also the genus. And if you go even further, the family, the order, etc., etc. That's how taxonomists in biology have classified species, and because this is how the biological world is structured as well. Yeah. So even an anti-Platonician view, namely the idea that individual biological individuals are not derived from the realm of ideas, but even a materialist, empirical, naturalist, skeptical view like the Anglo-Saxons usually have, they would nonetheless agree that the ideas, they might not exist in some otherworldly place, but they exist within the singulars. That would be an Aristotelian view, but they would agree nonetheless. That's the distinction between Plato and Aristotle. Plato believed that the ideas, which would be the universal or the essence, existed in their purity in an ideal realm, and that the existing world was just a realm of phenomena and images. And there was a dualistic distinction. And Aristotle, here Hegel, very intelligent, the boring German metaphysician, he noticed that Aristotle, in a way, he kind of agreed with Plato, and Aristotle did not disagree the way later interpreters actually who misinterpreted Aristotle wanted him to disagree. Namely, Aristotle, in a way, for him, the idea of Plato, the essence, was actually made wirklich, actual, within the singulars. Aristotle believed in the actualization of Platonic ideas within each singulars, in a way. Which is kind of true. Yeah. The idea of womanhood or manhood exists within each singular woman. But then it is particularized by age, ethnicity, nationality, level of intelligence, culture, economic status, etc., etc. That's for UPS for 30 minutes almost. Now I will briefly talk about Europe. But first, a little bit of philosophy. Again, a little bit of philosophy. Reality, here that's a little bit of simplified Spinozian view. Reality, without defining with too much complexity, is what is. The whole of reality is, whatever is. Leftists, they tend, from my view, it has been already more than, I understood this almost 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago. Leftists, if we have to draw an epistemological, philosophical distinction between the left and the right, leftists, they differ from right-wingers on a philosophical, epistemological ground by not looking at reality. Right-wingers, it's not always the case, but they tend to be realists, which can be either lucidity or sometimes cynicism. Leftists, they tend to disregard reality, which can be idealism in the noble political sense, but it can also be naivete or stupidity. So there is realism, lucidity, and cynicism on the right, idealism, naivete, and stupidity on the left, depending on the degree. To be lucid and realist is good. To be idealist and sometimes naive is good. To be stupid or to be cynical, both are not very pleasant or, well, yeah. So that's the distinction. Philosophically, that's the distinction between das Sein, the being, whatever is, and das Sollen, which literally translated in English means what ought to be. There is what is and what ought to be. Leftists, they tend to think about what ought to be. Right-wingers, they tend to think about what is. But it's too simplistic because speculative philosophy teaches us that precisely it is in the concept of what is to become what it ought to be. So there is negation within being, because being is not what it is. Being becomes what it ought to be, which is the source of movement, because it is in the nature of what is to try, here I speak in ordinary language, to try to become other than what it is, because it ought to be different. It works at all levels. The moon ought to be falling onto the earth, but actually, depending on the physical categorization, the moon is trying to go in a straight line, but it is being attracted by the gravitational pull of the earth, and therefore it goes in a straight line, but there are conflicting, opposed forces, the gravitational pull of the earth and the attempt to go in a straight line of the moon, and the compromise is the moon revolving around the earth. That would be classical physics, and the relativistic physical view of Einstein would be that actually the moon is going in a straight line but in a curved space-time. It's going in straight in a curve, ball, not ball, B-A-L-L, but ball, B-O-W-L, because the mass of the earth curves space-time, and the moon or any other satellite is going in a straight line but in a curved environment, one might say. Yeah. But morality, to take an example, humans, they are the way they are in a way, but trying to improve themselves morally, to go beyond themselves, to act morally, precisely, that's the ought, that's Sollen. You ought to behave in such a way. So humans, they are, one might say, they are dialectical. Yeah, they are constantly, I mean, not all of them, but most of them, the good ones. There are a lot of good humans, but most humans, they try to make an effort to to behave according to duty. Namely, they are aware. If they are not aware as individuals, so the society in which they grow up or live makes them become aware that humans are supposed to behave, and the supposed to, that's another word for ought to. So humans are not how they are supposed to be, but transcending. To transcend, that's another word for das Sollen. Yeah, so being is the transcending of itself. It's going beyond itself. That's Sollen. So negation, here it's in a good sense, good negation is within being. It seems very abstract, but actually it explains a lot. Yeah. So politically, yeah, the leftists, usually when they go out of, when they are teenagers or early young adults, they say spontaneously, we have to change the world. Das Sollen, that's the ought to, the world ought to be different from what it is. But precisely, that's idealism in the political sense. Right-wingers can be idealists in this perspective as well, but usually these are leftists who begin by considering the world that it has to be changed. Everything is bad. Our parents left us a disaster. We have to reshape everything, says the leftist since... who is the first leftist? The Gracch brothers, Gracchus in Roman, the Roman plebeian representatives who wanted equality or redistribution for the poor. Look where it took Rome. Oh, that's a joke. No, but actually, yeah, the leftists, they constantly believe that things have to be changed. But precisely, I wrote, before changing things, or before attempting to change things, you first have to acknowledge that they exist and to see the full picture. That's really the Spinozian view, where ethics and epistemology, ethics is another word for das Sollen, namely what ought to be, and epistemology is another word for trying to know what is. Spinoza is the thinker who reconciles ethics and epistemology, because his ethics consists in trying to understand what is, in a way. And when you think like this, you understand that what is the way it is supposed to be, in a way. Or if not, at least you understand the reason why it is the way it is. Yeah, so... Yeah, before trying to change things, you have to... Here, that's you have to, it's another word for das Sollen, but it's better, in a way, to try to understand why things are the way they are. The deconstructionists, for instance, they spent the past 50 years deconstructing pretty much everything, but maybe you should ask yourself, but maybe the reason why these institutions were put in place, maybe there was a reason. If you deconstruct everything, maybe everything will fall apart. Actually, this is what happens. So, yeah. Maybe the reason why marriage as an institution has persisted for millennia, the reason why borders, communities based on minimum shared characteristics, etc., the idea that encouraging people to work and not paying them to be idle, the reason why these things, the reason why most societies have considered that men and women were distinct, complementary, etc., there were reasons. And if you deconstruct everything, well, yeah. But then you have to understand that the deconstructionists, they are part of reality, and the reason why there are people who want to deconstruct everything, it's part of reality. Because reality is difficult at some moment for some people, etc. So, yeah. Yeah. Here, Zizek is very intelligent. He says in one of his videos, do not act, just think. You ought to leave the das Sollen away for a while and to focus on the theory, because if you act constantly in all directions, tirelessly to change things, maybe first you are not very likely to be successful. That's why theory is important. Here the Marxists, the scheming Marxists, they are intelligent, the cultural Marxists, you have to analyze, theorize, understand, and then you will act more efficiently. In pop culture, Bane and Batman, you fight like a young man with nothing held back. That's admirable, but mistaken. Yeah, so you have to be able to understand before acting that's human action. Mises talks about this. Human action is purposeful behavior, and it presupposes causality. Yeah, that understanding, it's not possible to completely understand all causal relations as a human because it's too complex, but at least vaguely, if you understand vaguely the causal relationship, you can act more efficiently, more economically in a sense. Scarcity of means to achieve desired ends, etc. Mises was not an idiot. Yeah. I laugh because maybe at some moment, there will be women, not many, but there will be a few women who will find my words about das Sollen, UPS, existence and essence, my very complex vocabulary. They will find this interesting, maybe. It sounds very boring, but actually it can be enlightening and even pleasant. Yeah. Yeah, I laugh because what I find pleasant and enjoyable most of the time, the overwhelming majority of humans on this planet, they find this obnoxiously boring. What I enjoy, no, I can enjoy things that most people enjoy, but there are some things that I really enjoy and who are interesting and who are good that the overwhelming majority of people find either completely uninteresting or boring or yeah. I wrote a good joke. If I will tell the joke if I have the time before the 1 hour. Yeah, but now I will talk about Europeans, because I intended to talk about the movement of spirit and Europeans. Yeah. In case it's not clear what happens in the modern world in the 21st century, but already in the second half of the 20th century, but it's in the continuity. Europeans, here it means white people, anthropological Europeans. It includes the Australians, the Canadians, the Argentinians partly, etc., the Americans, of course. They are being erased. Either, depending on your perspective, they are committing suicide, or they are being erased, or they are whatever, but they are declining, one might say, demographically, and then all the other aspects. But precisely, here I simplify, I've already talked about this. This decline, when especially young generations of Europeans, when they become aware of the impending demographic erasure in the coming decades, one might say, this is what has happened to me already more than 5 years ago. Six years ago, when I started my intellectual and spiritual awakening in 2016, unconsciously the driving force was the concern for the fate of Europeans, unconsciously and then consciously. And when you realize that your people here, your people is UPS, a particular group, is in the process of being erased. That the entire legacy is in the process of vanishing. You ask yourself the question, what is worth preserving? So here that's dialectical. I will not talk about this in too complex way, but the death of Western civilization, when I say Western people, historical Western people, brings also the revival. Because when you are wounded, or where you are in the process of being extinguished, the vital forces, they awaken to maintain, to assert themselves, so that there is the younger generation, especially, they in a way they fight back by trying to reclaim what they are in the process of losing. So the threat of extinction brings about a revival in interest and care and love and passion for European culture, European heritage, European legacy, etc. And here I will not rigorously define, but Western and European, they are partly different, partly connected in this simplified view. Western is more universal, European is more particular, but UPS, the West, in a way, that's if the West is considered not as a geopolitical entity, but as an ideology, Western ideology, not modern Western, which means feminism, tolerance, anti-racism, gay rights, egalitarianism, socialism, etc. Here, that's not the historical tradition of the West, or in its excessive way, but the classical Western tradition, which is liberal, in the sense of libertarian, actually. Individualism, property rights, tolerance, not of anything, but intelligent tolerance, respect for individual rights, science, liberties, political balance of power, limitations of power, commerce and trade, the development of the arts, etc., and other determination. Yeah, so the West is the universalist creed of Europeans. P would be Europeans, U would be the West. Yeah, so... And here, UPS explains very well why Western ideology in the noble sense can be applied to other people, like the Japanese, the South Koreans, partly the Jews of Israel, and partly the Turks, at some moments at least. Well, it can work for non-historically Western people. The main example are, of course, the Japanese and the South Koreans, or the inhabitants of Hong Kong, or partly Singapore, and of course all the minorities who have adopted Western values, and especially the Afro-Americans who are successful socially, and the minorities who have adapted in the West over the past few decades. So, in a sense, the Western ideal is truly universal because it has been proven to be adaptable to other particular groups of different religious, ethnic, cultural, geographical determinations. Yeah. So, I wrote, Europeans, which means anthropological Europeans, are a particular people who constantly seeks, consciously or unconsciously, to reach the universal. This is the specificity of Europeans. They are a particular people, like Northeast Asians, Sub-Saharan Africans, Southeast Asians, South Asians, Northern Africans, Native Americans, etc., Native Australians, Inuits, etc., etc. they are a particular people, but their specificity, which has asserted itself throughout the centuries and the millennia of Western history, has been precisely an attempt, and often the success at reaching the universal, either consciously or unconsciously. Yeah, and here I wrote many examples. I will just list without detail without too much detail. The Greeks, the ancient Greeks, they have become renowned for. I wrote this very quickly yesterday. Mathematics and geometry, and their findings, their discoveries have been universal when they were true, which will mean most of the time. And for instance, Greek mathematics and geometry and logic with Aristotle has been, or the Stoics, has been reused, has had a profound influence on the Jews and the Arabs, the great scholars of Islam during the golden age of Muslim Islamic civilizations, between the 8th and I would say 8th and 14th centuries. They were heavily influenced by Aristotle and by Greek mathematics, Greek science, Greek philosophy, Greek logic, etc., etc. So it's an example of a universalization. The Greeks were a particular people of European descent, but their ideas were universal, and not only I continue. They influenced science, Aristotle, of course, but Archimedes, Eratosthenes, and others. Hippocrates, the Greek doctor, physician, etc. Greek conquest, here it's less universal because it's not really scientific, but Alexander developed a universalist view by conquering first Persia and then going to India and conquering Egypt, etc. So that universality through the means of politics and geopolitics, and he was a cosmopolitan, Alexander the Great. Greek philosophy, of course, and Greek culture as a whole, architecture, citizenry, theater, statues, etc., commerce, etc. But the more scientific fields, mathematics, geometry, which is a branch of mathematics, logic, science, and philosophy, the Romans, they took with them the Greek legacy in a way, but they added law. The Greeks already had law, but the Romans, it was really their specialty, one must say. Roman law, judicial, the science of right, one might say. So law, engineering, the art of politics and military, politics and geopolitics. So the Romans, they were less efficient than the Greeks in really the scientific endeavors, but in law, engineering, and military and politics, and rhetoric in a way, they were better in a way. And again, Roman law has had a tremendous influence on the entire subsequent European history, but also Eastern history in a way, because in the Byzantium Empire, it has had a tremendous influence. It was partly and overwhelmingly at some point populated by Europeans, but there were nonetheless other groups, Middle Easterners, Northern Africans, Jews, and other ethnicities. Then Christianity. Christianity and the German peoples. The ambitions of the church and the papacy in the Middle Ages were universalist. They wanted to impose the Christian faith, one might say, to everyone eventually. Like the conquering ambitions of Alexander and then of the great Roman leaders were universalist as well. And then the explorers in the 13th century already, Marco Polo, and then in the 15th century the great travelers at sea, Vasco da Gama, Magellan, Columbus, Jacques Cartier, etc., etc. The Conquistadores, of course. So the explorers, it's a universal it's universal as well. Europeans discovered the modern world. The modern world was already discovered by the native people of the Americas and then Africa and Australia, but they consciously, first unconsciously, but then consciously unified the globe, not geographically, through mapping first, but then through commerce and trade, through religion partly by spreading Christianity. Then modern law, international law with people like Grotius, the thinkers of a universalist set of law and ethics, law, international law, the diplomacy, one might say. Modern science, of course, which was a revival, but a refinement and an improvement on Greek science. Galileo, Newton, Descartes, Bacon. Modern political theory, liberalism, the idea of progress, meritocracy, liberal egalitarianism in a way, liberal equality, individualism, science, tolerance, the balance of powers, etc. The classical liberal, not in the modern insane sense, but the classical, in the sense that Mises was a classical liberal. Modern economics, Adam Smith, then Ricardo, and the 19th century, the Austrians, but the neoclassics, etc., etc. Chemistry with Lavoisier and the development of chemistry in the 19th century. Biology with Darwin. Sociology in the second half of the 19th century. Colonialism in the 19th century predominantly. The French Empire, the British Empire, the Dutch Empire. Before, in the 15th, 16th century, there were the Spanish and Portuguese empires. The Russian Empire, the expansion of the Russians eastward. Then the American Empire in the 20th century, one might say. The abolition of slavery, the spread of human rights, which is kind of a mixture between modern geopolitical theory born in the 16th, 17th century plus individualism of the Enlightenment, so that's kind of the unity of both in a way. So these have been universalist, universal and or universalist. Universal is from the singular and the particular to the universal. Universalist is, so universal would be from bottom up, universalist would be from top down to impose onto others. That's why it's not very well liked. It can have good aspects, but it's not always very well liked because it's kind of forced onto others. And then nowadays in the modern era, of course, the universalist views of Europeans, which means white people, feminism, ecology, the conquest of space, transhumanism, it's predominantly pushed by white people, libertarianism, the modern thinkers of communism. Historically, communism as a theory was not, strictly speaking, European, because Marx, Rosa Luxemburg, Georgi Lukács, Trotsky, etc. were of Jewish origins, but there have been white communists, and the modern thinkers, a lot of them, they are still white in a way. Multiculturalism and the welfare state, these are predominantly Europeans. What they call social democracy and diversity, a lot of white people are in favor of this because it's in the universalist mindset. Also, I wrote, anti-racism has been a consistent thread throughout white history, and it is consistent with white morality. Precisely because whites tend to think beyond nepotism, beyond ethnocentrism. That's a book by Kevin MacDonald. He has shown consistently that the modern manifestation, which really are insane, excessive, but the modern anti-racist insanity of white leftists, actually it's in the continuity of a thread of really universalist thinking. It has become insane and excessive because the purpose is not to commit suicide, but the idea to think beyond one's own ethnic group. It has been a consistent, recurrent feature of European history. So I wrote, white people are universalists. And that's the specificity of whites. That their particularity, that which distinguishes white people from all other groups, is the consistency, the intensity, the extension with which the greatest thinkers, here in a broader sense, philosophers, scientists, artists, leaders, political leaders, etc., the extent to which they think in a universal way for everyone, in a way. Universalism, if something is good and true and just, it has to be good and true and just for everyone. White people, the overwhelming majority of them, when they think, one might say, they think like this. Okay, it's been more. So, UPS, I've already understood this a long time ago, but I repeat, it's becoming, I can express this more clearly. Europeans are a particular people which has consistently sought to go beyond its own particularity unconsciously, in a way. The purpose of Europeans is not to abolish themselves consciously as Europeans, although in the modern world that's the conscious purpose of a lot of white leftists, but unconsciously that's the urge towards universality, which expresses in all fields. And that's why what is most specifically European, as can be testified by the entire history of the West, the entire history of white people, is constantly to think universally, which in a way is the right way of thinking, and potentially the universal, because it is the same for all, can be accessed by anyone. The great Islamic scholars, the great Jewish intellectuals and thinkers, the modern great Asian scientists, etc., and all those who contribute, the great Afro-American thinkers, those who contribute to science in the broadest sense, or to universal achievements, their work, in a way, if it's true, if it's genuinely universal, it belongs to everyone, and it belongs to the whole of mankind, in a way. A universal achievement is a human accomplishment, in a way. And potentially any person, there is no logical impossibility in reaching the universal, whatever the other determinations are. But statistically, empirically, it has been and still is predominantly a characteristic of Europeans, for partly genetic, partly cultural reasons. Yeah. That's why Europeans are the most contradictory, one might say, but here in a good way, because they are a particular which constantly goes towards the universal. So a particularity which constantly seeks to negate itself, but for the good. It's not always the case, because it can have bad consequences. Colonialism, the conquest, military conquest and subjugation of people to impose Christianity or to impose modernity, of course it's excessive. And when it comes to self-negating demographic and cultural self-negation, it's excessive as well. But it's always the underlying trend of being universal and universalist. And Europeans cannot think differently than that. I mean, they can, some of them do, but actually that's the tendency. Elon Musk, he wants to conquer space. The transhumanists, most of them are white, they want to melt humans into technology. The ecologists, they want to save the planet, most of them are white. White people, they always come with universal projects, consciously or unconsciously. That's the constant, consistent feature. It can be empirically noticed. And here, that's a famous number, one might say, 97% of human accomplishments in the realm of science and arts. These statistics are from Charles Murray. The overwhelming majority, 97% of the greatest achievements in science, have been the product of anthropological Europeans. And here, the suffering that some, if not a lot of white people endure, is that they would like their people, their particular people, to stay with them, but precisely the particularity is to always expand toward the universal. That's why here, I know it's true philosophically because Hegel says, and here I agree with him because it's kind of intelligent, movement is an attempt to solve a contradiction. The most active, there are usually people who suffer, and here that's why I have to show compassion for whites and for the Jews, because historically white people and Jews have been the most active people, and it's not because they decide to let us conquer or let us revolt against everything. No, it's because they suffer, and their suffering is the driving force, the attempt, here Mises would agree, human action, purposeful behavior, an attempt to attain a better condition of living, more well-being, valuation of a better condition. That's the driving force behind human action. And the Jews and white people historically have been the most active people, sometimes collaborating, most of the time, consciously or unconsciously, sometimes, well, it's more difficult, but so in this sense, the Jews and white people, they suffer, and their suffering, their tremendous, relentless activity is an expression of their suffering, consciously or unconsciously. And here, a lot of white people, they suffer because their elites are, in a way, they have always been kind of against them, not because, I mean, partly there is class hatred, when I say the rich or the privileged or the powerful, they don't like the poor, they don't like the rich, partly, but it's true in most society. But white people first, they tend to be more rebellious. The poorest members, they tend to be more rebellious against the elites when they become a little bit too wealthy or too influential or too powerful or too greedy, not in terms of money but in terms of power, etc., which in a way is a good thing, but this is not what I meant here. It means white people, in a way, they would like their elites, their white elites, to take their side, which is what elites are supposed to do, because to be an elite you have to be the best in what among the best in what you do, but you also have to be a moral, an ethical elite, which means taking care of your own people, but of everyone eventually, but everyone includes your own people. Yeah, and white elites, they have had a tendency not always to care about their own people. Not always, sometimes yes, sometimes no, because precisely they are always beyond themselves in a way. The historical illustration is Alexander, who used the Macedonians to fulfill his universalist ambitions. And in a way, they enjoyed the Macedonians because they participated in a great adventure, I might say. But at some moment, they were exhausted because Alexander was too great for even the great Macedonians. Yeah. Yeah, so white people, a lot of them suffer because they would like to be taken care of by their elites, but their elites, they are constantly thinking about conquering another galaxy or another planet, solving problems for everyone about ecology, inventing new ways of living in society to improve the conditions of everyone, emancipating or whatever categories of people or living things which have not yet been emancipated. So white people, they are always on a quest, on the left or on the right, to change things, which can be very exhausting. It's stimulating, I guess, but they are always they are a hyperactive people. Western whites, they are hyperactive. It can be noticed in this day and age, but in previous days and ages as well, but still to this day, although it's an age of decadence for Europeans, they are still the most active, the most ambitious, the most forward thinking, the most adventurous, the most daring, the most yeah. So that's UPS. I will not talk much longer, but yeah, simply the particular, in a way, for a lot of Europeans, it's too restrictive, but it's not that they have an hostility towards their own people, but here, Edward Dutton, is an example, a great scientist, a great English scientist, but a great scientist. He wrote in his book about making sense of race that the genius strategy, unconsciously, this has been the group strategy adopted by northwestern whites, namely to create the social conditions to favor the emergence of geniuses, which then by their endeavor and their achievements will bring benefits for the whole of society. So it has been unconscious, of course, but most of the time, but historically, northwestern white societies have promoted and defended and favored the institutions which allow a lot of freedom for the individuals, even when the freedom of the Greeks and the Romans was limited compared to some of the freedoms that we would consider in the modern day. But in a way, they were more free in certain aspects because they were more independent, they were more patriotic in a republican way, but in many other ways, of course, they were much less free in the sense that we moderns understand freedom. But they were still much more free than all other peoples in the world. The Spartans, they were very totalitarian. It's a retroactive progression. They were very authoritarian in a way, in a collectivist way, but they were nonetheless more free than most other people of the rest of the world because they had a virtuous citizenry, a republican in a way. To say that Sparta was a republic, partly yes, partly no, but it was a republican oligarchy, a militaristic oligarchic republic in a way. Yeah, but then the Athenians and the Greeks at large and the Romans, the free city-states in the Middle Ages, etc., it grants more freedom to individuals, which then can express their creativity and their genius, which brings most of the time benefits indirectly or in the longer term for the whole of society. Thinking outside the box, questioning things, doubting, this has been a strategy. It brings a lot of disturbance and unbalance for society, because society is constantly being revolutionized by new ideas of great men and great thinkers, but the consequences have been overwhelming domination of the West over the rest of the world for the past 500 years, but then the consequence is that if it becomes excessive, there can be a disregard for civic and social ties, and this is what has been happening over the past 50 years with the multicultural ideology, one might say, which brings about the dissolution of Western societies in terms of customs, social bonds, ties of kinship, etc. That's the problem between the collective and the individuals. In soccer, that's a tactical view that a lot of managers have. How much freedom has to be granted to the best players? If the best players, they are too restricted, it's inefficient. If they are given too much freedom, it becomes a problem for the balance of the team. How to grant the greatest amount of freedom possible to great individuals, Messi, Ronaldo, and the previous ones, I don't know, Neymar, Ibrahimovic, Wayne Rooney, I don't know, Haaland, Mbappé, etc., etc. Zidane in his days. How to grant the proper amount of liberty to great individuals so that they might bring the greatest amount of benefits for the whole group. The same goes in basketball, I guess, with LeBron, Kobe, etc. Yeah. And here I will conclude with UPS that precisely the true universality is not the abstract universality, but precisely it is the universality which particularizes and singularizes itself, and to reach the universal, one has to go through the mediation of the particular. Fruits in general do not exist. There are only individual fruits of a particular variety. And here I will conclude with what I intended to talk about, actually. The American ideal, the spirit of the American Constitution, is the universality or the universalization of the European soul, in a way. That's how I interpret this, but actually I know it's kind of true. The ideals of the United States of America, embodied in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the institutions and the spirit of this country, precisely it's the manifestation in the realm of politics of a particular group of people, Europeans, but it's the universal extracted out of the particular, so that these ideals, because they are universal, they can be applied to all, and historically, the US have succeeded in sharing this universality with others. It has been difficult, but it has worked. There has been insufficiencies, failures, maybe. It ought, Sein and Sollen, it ought to have been better, maybe, and it can still be improved, but nonetheless, it can be empirically proven that the universal ideal of the founders have been shared successfully with other groups. It has been difficult, but it has been successfully shared with Afro-Americans, Jews, Hispanics, Asians, etc., native Indians. Yes, but other groups have succeeded, not as much as whites, not as much as they could have, maybe not as much as they should have. Here, empiricism, yeah, but there have been successes. The bell curve proves this, and the genuine diversity, the genuine success of diversity people in all fields is a testimony of this. On the European continent, it's different because they have tried to imitate the US, but with an egalitarian ideal, which makes it impossible or much less likely. But genuine success from individuals coming from all groups while respecting the ideal of liberty and the ideal of the Constitution, it has been a success. So that's why the US, in a way, they are so important for Europeans, because it's a successful embodiment of the universal idea of a particular people. Yeah, the Teutonic worldview. Yeah. That's my interpretation. I could speak a lot more coherently, more rigorously, etc. But I will stop there. Okay, I wanted to make less than an hour. It's 1 hour and 20. I have a lot more things to say, but I needed to express my ideas about this. I don't know when the video will be published, but yeah, UPS. That's what I had to say.